March 4th, 2023, Chicago, Illinois. It was a cold Saturday evening when Ray Davis rang my doorbell. I had been pacing the living room for hours, unable to shake the gnawing tension in my chest. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows, as if the world itself was warning me about what was coming. When I opened the door, Ray stood there, his trench coat dusted with sleet, holding a leather folder under his arm. His face was unreadable, a mask of professionalism that made me uneasy. "Evening, Mr. Carter," he said, stepping inside and brushing off the cold. "We need to talk." We sat down in the living room. My hands shook slightly as I poured us both cups of coffee. Monica was out again. This time, it was supposedly a dinner with her book club. That's what she always said: book club, yoga, catching up with friends. But lately, the explanations felt hollow, like rehearsed lines from a bad play. Ray placed the folder on the coffee table but didn't open it right away. He studied me for a moment, his sharp, calculating eyes scanning my face. "I've been in this business a long time, Mr. Carter," he began, "and I've seen a lot of things. What I'm about to tell you isn't easy, but you need to hear it." My throat tightened. I braced myself. "Just tell me." Ray nodded and flipped open the folder. Inside were photos, grainy, zoomed-in shots taken from a distance. In one, Monica was sitting in a dimly lit restaurant, her hand resting lightly on another man's arm. In another, she was laughing, her face turned toward him in a way that was too intimate for comfort. But it wasn't just one man. As Ray slid photo after photo across the table, my stomach churned. Monica wasn't meeting with just one person. There were several. Different faces, different places. And not all of them were romantic. Some looked dangerous. "She's involved with more than you think," Ray said, his voice low. "I've been following her for a week, and she's met with 3 men and 1 woman. The woman, her name's Elena, has ties to a known smuggling ring operating out of the South Side." "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, my voice rising. "Smuggling? What does that have to do with Monica?" Ray leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I don't have all the details yet, but it looks like she's gotten herself mixed up in something illegal. That might explain the missing items you told me about." I stared at him, my mind racing. The stolen silverware, the watches. Had Monica been taking them to sell? And for what? I couldn't wrap my head around it. Before I could press for answers, the front door opened. Monica stepped inside, shaking off her coat, her face flushed from the cold. She froze when she saw Ray sitting in our living room. Her eyes darted to the folder on the table, then to me. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tight. Ray stood, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Do you have anything to say to your husband, Mrs. Carter?" Monica's face went pale. Her hands trembled as she set her purse down. What is this about?" Ray didn't flinch. "You know exactly what it's about." I expected her to deny everything, to launch into some elaborate story about how this was all a misunderstanding. But instead, she looked at Ray, her lips quivering, and said, "I didn't have a choice." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, standing up. Ray stepped closer to her, his voice cold. "You should tell him, Monica, or I will." Monica backed away, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Then, to my utter disbelief, she sank to her knees in front of Ray, her head bowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." "What the hell is going on?" I shouted, my voice cracking. Ray didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on Monica. "Tell him who you've been meeting with. Tell him why." Monica shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. They'll kill me." The words hit me like a brick. "Kill you?" "Monica, what are you talking about?" Ray sighed, finally turning to me. "Your wife is in over her head, Mr. Carter. She's been working with a group that deals in stolen goods. Jewelry, antiques, high-value items. My guess is, she's been taking things from your house to pay off a debt or keep herself out of trouble." I stared at Monica, my heart pounding. "Is that true? Is that why all my stuff has been disappearing?" She nodded, her sobs racking her body. "I didn't want to do it, but I didn't have a choice. They came to me, said I owed them. I didn't know what else to do. Ray's expression hardened. Who are they, Monica? Names. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. Elena. And her people. I was stupid. I borrowed money from her years ago, before we even got married. I thought I'd paid it back, but she came back a few months ago, said I owed more. She threatened me, said if I didn't cooperate. She didn't need to finish the sentence. I could fill in the blanks. Ray rubbed his temple, muttering under his breath. This is worse than I thought. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The woman I'd spent a decade with, the woman I thought I knew, was a stranger. And now, her secrets were dragging me into a world I wanted no part of. But before I could process it all, Ray's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face darkening. We've got company, he said, moving to the window. Outside, 2 black SUVs pulled into the driveway. Who the hell is that? I asked, my voice shaking. Ray pulled a gun from his coat, his voice steady but firm. Trouble. The air inside the house thickened as the sound of car doors slamming outside jolted us all to attention. Monica's tear-streaked face twisted with panic as she scrambled to her feet. Ray's movements were calm but deliberate, as though he'd rehearsed this scenario 1,000 times. Stay behind me, he said, checking his gun. His tone left no room for argument. Who are they? I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. Monica clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. It's Elena. She must have found out you hired him. Her voice broke into a whisper. They're here to silence us. A chill ran down my spine. This was no longer about a cheating spouse or a broken marriage. This was a matter of life and death. Ray motioned for us to follow him into the kitchen, away from the windows. Do you have a back exit? He asked. Yeah, through the laundry room, I said, my voice tight with fear. Good. Stay low and keep quiet, he said, peering around the corner toward the front door. The knock that followed was almost polite, a sharp rap that belied the menace lurking behind it. My heart raced as I heard a muffled voice call out, Monica, we know you're in there. Open the door, and this won't get messy. Monica whimpered, and Ray shot her a glare. You need to pull it together, he snapped in a hushed tone. They can smell fear. Ray, what are we supposed to do? I whispered, my voice trembling. He glanced at me, his face calm but firm. If they get in, I'll handle it. You two get to the back door and don't stop running until you're clear of the house. Understood? Before we could respond, the polite knocking turned into a loud crash as the front door splintered open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the foyer, accompanied by low, menacing voices. They're inside, Monica whispered, clutching my arm tighter. Ray positioned himself at the kitchen doorway, his gun drawn. Move, he hissed, jerking his head toward the laundry room. Monica and I crawled as quickly as we could, trying to stay out of sight. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as we reached the back door. But when I tried the handle, it didn't budge. It's locked, I whispered. Monica fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so badly that she dropped them onto the floor. Hurry up, I hissed, my eyes darting back toward the kitchen. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, the sharp crack reverberating through the house. Monica screamed, and I pulled her down to the floor, shielding her with my body. Ray's voice boomed from the kitchen. Stay back. I won't ask again. A chilling laugh answered him. You're outnumbered, Davis. You really think you're walking out of here alive? I could hear Ray's footsteps retreating toward us. He appeared around the corner, his face grim. Change of plans, he said, his voice clipped. We're going out the front. What? I hissed. They're out there. Ray didn't miss a beat. You want to stay here and wait for them to come to you? Before I could respond, a second gunshot shattered the silence, followed by the sound of glass breaking. Ray grabbed Monica by the arm and yanked her to her feet. Move. We followed him back through the kitchen, my legs trembling as we passed the broken glass from the shattered window. 2 figures were climbing through, their faces obscured by masks. Ray fired twice, forcing them to duck for cover. "Go! Now!" he shouted, pushing us toward the front door. We sprinted through the foyer, my pulse pounding in my ears. As we reached the front yard, the headlights of the black SUVs illuminated the driveway like spotlights. Another masked figure stood beside one of the vehicles, raising a gun in our direction. "Down!" Ray barked, tackling us to the ground just as a bullet whizzed overhead. The chaos was deafening. Tires screeched as one of the SUVs reversed into the street, blocking our escape route. Ray fired 2 more shots, hitting one of the tires. The SUV lurched to a stop, and the masked figure dove for cover. "This way!" Ray shouted, dragging us toward my car parked at the curb. I fumbled with my keys as we reached it, my hands shaking so badly that it took me 3 tries to unlock the door. We piled inside, Ray taking the passenger seat while Monica and I squeezed into the front. "Drive!" Ray yelled, his voice cutting through my panic. I slammed my foot on the gas, the car lurching forward. The remaining SUV screeched into pursuit, its headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. "Where am I going?" I shouted, gripping the wheel tightly. "Anywhere but here," Ray barked, twisting in his seat to fire at the pursuing vehicle. The city streets blurred around us as I sped through red lights and sharp turns, Monica clutching my arm as though letting go would mean certain death. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ray directed me to a nondescript parking garage on the outskirts of town. "Pull in here," he said. I parked on the second level, my hands still trembling as I killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of our ragged breathing. Ray turned to us, his face hard. "This isn't over. They'll come after us again, and we need to be ready." Monica burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. I wanted to comfort her, but I was too numb to move. My world had been turned upside down, and I had no idea what was waiting for us next. Ray's voice cut through the tension. "We need to talk. There's more to this than you know." I stared at him, my heart sinking. "What do you mean?" Ray sighed, pulling out his phone. "Elena's not just coming after Monica. She's coming after you, too. And I think I know why." The tension in the dim parking garage was suffocating. Ray's words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Monica was still crying, and my hands were clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles were white. "What do you mean she's coming after me?" I asked, my voice a low, trembling whisper. Ray leaned back in the passenger seat, exhaling deeply. He tapped his phone screen a few times before holding it up for me to see. It was a blurry image of a document, some kind of ledger, with names and numbers scrawled across it in neat columns. "This," he said, "is one of Elena's payment records. Your name's on it." My stomach dropped. "What the hell are you talking about? I've never even met her." Ray's eyes bore into mine. "She's been laundering money through businesses she suspects won't notice. Your company's one of them." My breath caught. "No, that's impossible. I'd know if something like that was happening." Ray shook his head. "Not necessarily. These people are professionals. They find cracks in the system, exploit them, and leave no trace. You might not have known, but someone in your office sure as hell did." I felt the walls of my reality crumbling even further. "So, what? I'm a pawn in some scheme I didn't even know about?" Ray nodded grimly. "And now that I've been poking around, Elena thinks you're a threat. If she can't scare you into backing off, she'll eliminate you altogether." Monica's sobs grew louder. "This is all my fault," she wailed. "If I hadn't borrowed that money, if I hadn't lied, none of this would be happening." I turned to her, my voice sharper than I intended. "You think?" I snapped. "You've dragged me into your mess, Monica. You've put both of us, and God knows who else, in danger." "Enough," Ray interrupted, his voice firm. "Arguing isn't going to help. Right now, we need to focus on surviving this." The plan was simple, at least on paper. Ray would take us to a safe house he kept on the outskirts of the city, a place he claimed was off the radar. From there, he'd make contact with a federal agent he trusted to help expose Elena's operation and clear my name. But nothing about this night was simple. The drive to the safe house was tense and silent. Monica sat in the back, staring out the window with vacant, haunted eyes. Ray kept his gun in his lap, his gaze flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. When we arrived, the house looked more like a forgotten relic than a sanctuary. It was small and weathered, with peeling paint and overgrown weeds choking the yard. But Ray moved with confidence, unlocking the door and ushering us inside. "Stay away from the windows," he instructed. The interior was Spartan, barely furnished, with a faint smell of mildew. I dropped onto an old couch, exhaustion crashing over me like a wave. Monica sat on the edge of a rickety chair, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Ray disappeared into another room, returning a few minutes later with a laptop. "I've been tracking Elena's movements," he said, setting it up on the coffee table. "She's been meeting with someone inside your company, Jake. If we can figure out who, we'll have leverage to take her down." I leaned forward, staring at the screen as he pulled up surveillance footage and financial records. My head spun as the pieces began to come together. That's Robert," I said, pointing to one of the grainy images. Robert was a senior manager at my firm, a guy I'd never fully trusted but had no concrete reason to doubt, until now. Ray nodded. "He's been feeding Elena information and using your name to cover the tracks. My guess? He's been skimming off the top for himself, too." I felt a surge of anger. Robert had dragged me into this mess, all while profiting from my ignorance. Before I could dwell on it, Monica's phone buzzed. She hesitated, glancing at Ray before answering. "Hello?" Her face paled as she listened, and then she handed the phone to me, her hands trembling. "It's her." I pressed the phone to my ear, my pulse racing. "Who is this?" A woman's voice, smooth and menacing, came through the line. "Good evening, Mr. Carter. I'm disappointed we have to meet under these circumstances." "Elena," I said, my voice cold. "I have to admit, your little investigator has been a thorn in my side," she continued. "But this ends tonight. You have something I want, and I have something you value. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. She chuckled. "Check your email." Ray pulled up my email on his laptop, and my stomach churned at what we saw. A photo of my office building, its entrance covered in red spray paint. "You're next?" She wasn't just threatening me. She was sending a message to everyone connected to me. "What do you want?" I asked through gritted teeth. "Your silence," Elena replied. "You and your investigator walk away, and this all goes away. Keep pushing, and your wife won't be the only one regretting her choices." I hung up, shaking with fury. Ray was already making calls, his voice low and urgent as he spoke to his contact. "Can we stop her?" I asked. Ray's eyes met mine, steady but serious. "It won't be easy, but yes, we need to act now." By dawn, the plan was in motion. Ray's contact arranged a sting operation, using the information we'd gathered to lure Elena into a trap. Robert was arrested, spilling everything in exchange for a plea deal. When the dust settled, Monica and I sat on the porch of the safe house, the early morning light casting long shadows. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. I nodded, the bitterness in my heart softening just slightly. "We're not the same people we were when we started, Monica. Maybe this was always how it was going to end." She didn't argue. She just sat there, staring at the horizon, as the life we'd built together crumbled behind us. Ray stepped outside, his phone in hand. "It's done," he said. "Elena's in custody. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign, but as I looked at the road ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going back to the life I had before. It was time to start over.